Washington navigated her wheelchair down the narrow aisle of the luxury charter jet. At 35, she valued comfort over aesthetics, especially on a long-distance flight. She wore a faded gray oversized sweatshirt and loose sweatpants. Her sneakers were scuffed. She looked completely out of place among the plush leather seats and mahogany paneling. Julian Wood stood near the galley, arms crossed. As the senior flight attendant, he viewed this cabin as his personal domain. He prided himself on maintaining an exclusive atmosphere. Seeing Mia, his jaw tightened. He stepped directly into her path, blocking the aisle. Julian did not offer a greeting. He simply stared down at her worn clothes and the manual wheelchair. "The main cabin boarding is delayed," Julian said, his tone entirely flat. "You need to wait in the terminal. This section is strictly for corporate executives." Mia stopped her wheelchair. She looked up at him, keeping her expression neutral. "I have clearance to board now," she replied softly. "My seat is right there." She pointed to the executive suite. Julian let out a sharp, mocking sigh. He leaned closer, invading her personal space. "Look at yourself. You really think you belong in the executive suite? People pay thousands for this experience. We do not run a charity transport service. Turn around." Mia did not flinch. She slowly reached into her canvas bag. "I can show you my digital boarding pass," she offered, her voice remaining perfectly steady. Julian scoffed loudly. "I do not care what forged document you have on your phone. You are not staying here." Harper Kelly, a junior attendant, watched from the galley. Harper bit her lip, clearly uncomfortable, but Julian gave a harsh glare, keeping her totally silent. Mia realized standard reasoning would not work. Julian had already made up his mind based entirely on her faded clothes and her wheelchair. She needed a completely different approach. She took a deep breath, silently analyzing the hostile environment right around her. Mia refused to retreat. Instead, she locked the brakes on her wheelchair. The metallic click echoed sharply in the quiet cabin, signaling her absolute refusal to back down. She pulled a specialized tablet from her canvas bag. It was thick, encased in heavy rubber, completely unlike a standard consumer device. Julian stared at it with visible disdain, assuming it was just an old cheap computer. "I am not asking for your permission," Mia stated calmly. "I am informing you that I belong on this aircraft." She began typing on the heavy tablet, pulling up the internal passenger manifest. Julian's face flushed red with sudden anger. He was not used to being defied, certainly not by someone who looked like Mia. He took a bold step forward, reaching toward her hands. "Put that garbage away," he demanded, his voice rising in volume. "You are holding up my schedule. If you will not leave voluntarily, I will move you myself." Before Mia could respond, Julian grabbed the handles of her wheelchair. He yanked the chair backward with unnecessary force. Since the brakes were still engaged, the wheels dragged harshly against the premium carpet, making a terrible grinding sound. Mia jolted forward in her seat, her grip tightening on the heavy tablet. "Take your hands off my chair immediately," Mia warned, her voice dropping to a dangerous low register. "You are violating safety protocols." Harper stepped out of the galley, her eyes wide with alarm. "Julian, stop," Harper pleaded softly. "Let me just check the system. Maybe there is a mistake." Julian shot Harper a furious look. "Get back to the galley right now, Harper. I am handling this trespasser." He shoved the wheelchair again, harder this time, trying to force the locked wheels to turn. Mia did not shout. She simply activated the secure recording function on her heavy rubber tablet, capturing every single word he spoke and every single harsh action he took during this highly unprofessional and dangerous encounter today. Julian realized he could not move the heavy wheelchair easily. The rubber tires held firmly against the floor. Panting slightly, he stepped around to face Mia again. His pristine uniform now felt restrictive, and his anger continued to multiply. He hated losing control of any situation. "You think you are so smart?" Julian sneered, leaning down, until he was just inches from her face. "You think you can just roll in here and play games I deal with VIPs every day. You are nothing like them. You are a complete fraud." Mia wiped a smudge from her tablet screen completely, ignoring his face. Her calmness infuriated him even more. She was acting as if he did not matter, as if his authority meant absolutely nothing. "I am the lead systems architect for this entire aviation network," Mia said, keeping her voice even. "I designed the secure diagnostic software that runs this aircraft. My clothes are dirty because I spent the last 12 hours crawling under a server rack. Now, I recommend you step back." Julian stared at her, then burst into cruel, mocking laughter. The sound filled the cabin, harsh and ugly. "A software architect. Really, that is the best lie you could invent." He pointed a trembling finger at her faded sweatshirt. "You look like someone who collects scrap metal for a living. You probably stole that tablet from a real engineer." Harper watched from the doorway, her hand shaking. She wanted to intervene, but the fear of losing her job paralyzed her. She knew Julian had fired others before. Mia tapped another icon on her screen, connecting her device directly to the aircraft mainframe. She did not need to raise her voice. She did not need to argue. She just needed to finish the connection sequence and prepare her next move carefully. Her digital trap was almost ready to spring shut. She took another breath and waited for him to make his final, most devastating mistake right now. Julian was completely oblivious to the silent digital commands Mia was executing. His ego was entirely bruised, and his mind was fixated on removing her from the aircraft. He pulled a radio from his belt, his eyes never leaving her face. "Captain," Julian said into the device, his voice dripping with fabricated distress. "We have a highly uncooperative trespasser in the executive suite. She is refusing to disembark and is becoming verbally hostile. I need security immediately." Mia stopped typing for a brief second. She looked at him with genuine curiosity. "You are willing to lie on an official aircraft communication channel?" she asked. "That is a severe violation of federal aviation rules." Julian lowered the radio, a smug smile spreading across his face. "Who are they going to believe, a senior flight attendant with 10 years of perfect service or a pathetic woman in a wheelchair wearing actual garbage?" Harper gasped from the galley. The sheer cruelty of the statement finally broke through her fear. "Julian, you cannot say things like that," Harper shouted, stepping into the main cabin. "She has not done anything wrong. She just wants to show you her pass." Julian turned on Harper, his eyes blazing with fury. "You are done. Harper, consider yourself terminated the minute we land. Now get out of my sight before I have security throw you out too." Harper shrank back, tears welling in her eyes, but she did not leave. She stayed near the door, silently witnessing everything. Mia felt a surge of protective anger for the young attendant. She had dealt with arrogant men like Julian her entire career, but dragging an innocent employee into his power trip crossed another line. She pressed a final button on her tablet, locking the cabin doors digitally. There was absolutely no turning back now. The system was armed. Julian was trapped in his own terrible decisions. He would soon realize that he had picked a fight with the absolutely wrong passenger. The cabin felt extremely tense as Julian waited for ground security to arrive. He paced back and forth, shooting venomous glares at Mia. He was completely convinced that he had the upper hand. He believed his uniform and title made him untouchable. Mia simply watched him with cold precision. She was calculating her final move. "Security will be here any minute," Julian taunted, crossing his arms aggressively. "They will drag you out of that chair and dump you on the tarmac. You should have just listened to me." Mia did not answer. She brought her tablet up, swiping across the heavy screen to finalize the diagnostic lockdown. The screen glowed bright red, indicating the core system override was ready. Julian noticed the red light reflecting on her face. He suddenly realized she was actually controlling something connected to the aircraft. Panic finally pierced through his overwhelming arrogance. He lunged forward without thinking. "Give me that device right now," Julian yelled, reaching aggressively across her lap to snatch the heavy tablet. Mia instinctively pulled the tablet away, shifting her shoulders to block his aggressive reach. Do not touch my property, Mia stated sharply, her voice echoing in the cabin. Julian missed the tablet. His fingers grazed the heavy rubber casing, slipping off completely. The sudden failure enraged him, beyond any rational thought. His face contorted into a mask of pure fury. He felt humiliated that a woman in worn clothes was outsmarting him in front of Harper. Julian pulled his hand back, lost all control, and swung his open palm directly at her. The slap struck Mia across her left cheek with a terrifying loud crack. The sharp sound bounced off the luxury wooden panels. Harper screamed from the doorway. Mia turned her head slowly back to face him, her cheek burning bright red. But her eyes remained perfectly and dangerously calm during this entire horrifying and totally unacceptable assault by a supposedly professional crew member on this quiet morning flight. Julian froze. His hand hung in the air, trembling violently. He realized instantly what he had just done. He had crossed a massive legal line. Striking a passenger was an automatic career termination, a potential federal crime, and a guaranteed lawsuit. But his pride refused to let him apologize. Instead, he doubled down, pointing a shaking finger at her. "You attacked me," Julian shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. "Harper saw it. You grabbed my wrist, and I defended myself. You are going to federal prison for assaulting a flight crew member." Harper shook her head frantically, tears streaming down her face. "No," Harper cried out. "She did not touch you, Julian. You hit her for no reason." Julian glared at Harper. "Shut up. You are going to corroborate my story, or I will make sure you never work in this industry again." Mia wiped a small drop of blood from the corner of her mouth. She did not yell. She did not cry. She simply looked down at her heavy tablet and pressed the large red icon pulsating on the screen. Instantly, the cabin lights shifted from soft white to a glaring emergency amber. A loud electronic siren blared through the aircraft speakers. The automated security system engaged. Heavy internal deadbolts slammed shut on the main cabin doors, locking them securely from the inside. Julian stumbled backward, his hands covering his ears. "What did you do?" he screamed over the blaring alarms. "Turn that off right now." "What is happening?" Mia placed the tablet calmly on her lap. "I initiated a level 4 security lockdown," she explained, her voice cutting clearly through the noise. "The cockpit is now sealed. Ground control has been alerted to a rogue crew member. Every camera on this aircraft just uploaded its footage directly to federal servers. You are completely finished." Julian stared at her in absolute horror, finally understanding his massive error in judgment today on this very expensive chartered private aviation flight. The heavy reinforced door to the cockpit swung open before the locking mechanism could fully engage. Captain James Carter rushed into the cabin, his face pale and tense. He had heard the automated warning in his headset and assumed a terrorist threat. Seeing Mia sitting calmly in her wheelchair while Julian cowered near the galley confused him deeply. "Mia," Captain Carter said, completely ignoring Julian. "Are you all right? Why did you trigger the network override?" Julian felt his entire stomach drop into his shoes. The captain knew her name. He spoke to her with deep respect. Julian tried to interrupt, his voice trembling. "Captain, she attacked me. I had to defend myself. She does not belong on this aircraft. She is an intruder." Captain Carter turned slowly to face Julian. The look in the older man's eyes was pure steel. "Shut your mouth, Julian. You have absolutely no idea who you are talking to." The captain gestured toward Mia. "This is Mia Washington. She is the lead systems engineer for our entire parent company. She designed the avionics software that keeps this expensive corporate jet in the sky. She is here today to run a final diagnostic check on the new network before our executive board flies tomorrow." The color completely drained from Julian's face. He looked at Mia, then at the heavy tablet, and finally at his own shaking hands. He had just slapped the senior-level technical officer in the company. He had called her garbage. He had threatened to have her thrown onto the tarmac. Mia looked at Julian, her expression perfectly composed. Your assumption that my wheelchair and my clothes made me worthless was a catastrophic error, she said. Julian took a stumbling step backward, his breathing growing rapid and shallow as the sheer magnitude of his actions crashed down on him. Inside this small, inescapable luxury cabin today, without any possible escape route left for him to take right now at this late moment here. Julian tried to form words, but his mouth was completely dry. His heart hammered wildly against his ribs, a frantic rhythm of absolute terror. He had built his entire identity around gatekeeping wealth and power, serving those he deemed worthy, while aggressively punishing anyone who did not meet his superficial standards. Now that same arrogant worldview had just destroyed his life. He looked at Captain Carter, hoping for some miraculous intervention. But the captain was already speaking into his radio, coordinating with local authorities to have Julian arrested upon exiting the aircraft. Julian looked at Harper, the junior attendant he had relentlessly bullied. She stood tall, staring back at him, with no pity, holding her head high. She was no longer afraid of him. Finally, Julian looked at Mia. She had not raised her voice. She had not thrown a tantrum. She had simply let him hang himself with his own prejudice. The reality of his situation crushed him like a physical weight. The federal charges, the end of his aviation career, the public humiliation, the lawsuit. His vision began to blur at the edges. The blaring amber emergency lights seemed to spin in circles. A loud ringing noise filled his ears, drowning out the alarms. He gasped for air, but his lungs refused to expand. I did not know, Julian whispered weakly, his knees buckling. You should not have needed to know, Mia replied softly, watching him fall. Julian's legs gave out entirely. He collapsed onto the plush carpet, landing exactly where he had tried to dump her belongings earlier. He curled into a pathetic ball, hyperventilating as the shadows swallowed his vision completely. He lost consciousness right there on the floor, a broken man who had let his own toxic vanity ruin everything he valued. Security teams finally breached the main door, rushing inside to handle the unconscious former attendant lying in the aisle right now at this very exact moment in time on this morning flight. 2 airport police officers handcuffed Julian while he was still barely conscious. They dragged him off the aircraft in front of the entire ground crew. The video recording from Mia's tablet and the aircraft security cameras provided undeniable proof of the unprovoked assault. There was absolutely no debate. Harper gave her official statement to the police, confirming every single detail without hesitation. For the very first time in her young career, she felt empowered. She realized that standing up to a bully was difficult, but remaining silent was much worse. Mia declined medical attention. She rubbed her sore cheek, updated the incident log on her heavy tablet, and continued her system diagnostics. The corporate executives were informed immediately. By noon, Julian received his formal termination notice in his holding cell. His aviation license was permanently revoked due to the federal security violation. He had lost his prestigious career in a matter of minutes. News of the incident spread quickly through the company network. However, Mia made sure it was not framed as a simple story of revenge. She wanted it to serve as a strict lesson about basic human respect. The company updated its training protocols, emphasizing that every passenger, regardless of their physical appearance or mobility, deserved equal dignity. Harper was promoted to senior attendant on the executive fleet. She replaced Julian and quickly created a welcoming professional environment for everyone. Mia finished her work that afternoon and boarded her flight back home. She wore the exact same faded gray sweatshirt and loose sweatpants. She rolled her manual wheelchair down the aisle. With quiet confidence, completely unbothered by anyone's gaze. She knew that true power never needed an expensive suit or a pristine uniform to prove its worth to anyone. She had successfully defended her dignity today, protecting herself and protecting others from arrogant people who judge books by their covers. The skies finally felt safe and welcoming, once again, for every traveler, everywhere on this beautiful evening tonight. 6 months later, Mia sat in a brightly lit corporate boardroom. She was presenting a major software upgrade to the executive committee. Her wheelchair was positioned at the head of the large glass table. She wore a tailored jacket this time, but paired it comfortably with soft jeans. She had nothing left to prove. Her work spoke for itself. A new training initiative had been rolled out across the entire aviation company. It was unofficially called the Respect Protocol. It mandated severe consequences for any employee who discriminated against passengers based on appearance or physical ability. Julian was officially a ghost in the industry. His court case had ended with a suspended sentence and heavy fines. Without his high-paying job, he struggled to maintain the luxurious lifestyle he had always believed he deserved. He was last seen working as a basic logistics clerk for a local delivery company, wearing a cheap polyester uniform he once would have openly mocked. He had finally learned what it felt like to be completely invisible. Harper, meanwhile, flourished in her new leadership role. She frequently requested Mia's flights, ensuring the engineer always had a smooth, peaceful journey. Their brief interaction on that terrible morning had forged a quiet, mutual respect. As the board meeting concluded, the executives applauded Mia's presentation. She smiled, closed her secure tablet, and unlocked the brakes on her wheelchair. Rolling out of the boardroom, she felt a profound sense of peace. She had taken a moment of ugly prejudice and transformed it into lasting systemic change. Mia rolled toward the large glass windows, looking out at the planes taking off in the distance. The world was often cruel, but she knew how to navigate it on her own terms. She was 35 years old, incredibly brilliant, totally independent, and absolutely unstoppable in everything she chose to do from this exact moment forward. Always ready for the next big challenge waiting just over the far, distant horizon right now.